Welcome to Bible class at the Granbury Church of Christ. I really do appreciate your presence as we continue our Bible study titled From Slavery to Conquest, going with God's people as they traveled from Egypt to the Promised Land. And we're just right at the point of entering the Promised Land as we're going to read today from the book of Joshua and crossing over into the Promised Land. And so we'll be at Joshua chapter 3, verse 1. Here in just a moment, I invite you to open up your Bible to that place as we can read along together as Israel crosses the Jordan. We're reading all of this and doing this study under the direction of Romans 15, verse 4. For everything that was written in the past was written to teach us, so that through the endurance taught in the Scriptures and the encouragement they provide, we might have hope. I'm sorry I failed to invite you to read that with me orally. We would read it aloud. But I hope you did anyway, because we've been doing that together in all the previous lessons. Before we go any further, though, let's pray. Our Father in heaven, let all praise be given to you this day. And Father, as we enter into this time of study and hearing your word and studying your word, we give you thanks for those things that were written in the past, that were written for our learning, that we might know you better, understand you better, and be faithful in following you. We pray, Father, that you will help us pay attention to your word when it's read, that you will help us to be devoted to reading your word daily, that we would come to the point that we truly delight in your word. We want to thank you, Father, for those who have gone before us, who have made it possible for us to have so many copies of your word, so many good resources. We are truly blessed beyond measure. And I pray, Father, that you'll help us remember to whom much is given, much is going to be expected. We're grateful, Father, for the teaching that we receive from it, that we would be people who learn not to be afraid of this world, not to be afraid of Satan himself, but our fear, our reverence, our worship is of you and you alone, and you only will we serve. Father, we're so thankful. We know we can pray today through the name of Jesus, your word that became flesh and dwelt among us, that we might truly see even clearer what you meant early on and what you desired early on. And so I pray, Father, that you'll help us to be constant in reading, eager in study, always delighting in what you reveal to us. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. In the previous lesson, we watched as Joshua succeeded Moses, or we might say it this way, we watched as Moses passed the baton of leadership from himself to Joshua at the conclusion of Deuteronomy. And then in 31:7, this is how it happened. Moses summoned Joshua, said to him in the sight of all of Israel, and so everyone was clear who's going to lead them into Jordan, into the Promised Land, across the Jordan. Won't be Moses, it's going to be Joshua. You shall go with this people into the land. But with everyone also understanding, it is the Lord who goes before you. Before you, Joshua, the Lord is going before you. And Joshua is clear about that. Before the people, remember, the Lord is going before you. He will be with you. And then we also saw that very touching part of the conclusion of the book of Deuteronomy, where up on the top of Mount Nebo, God was with Moses, and I've let you see it, the Promised Land that is. Look across the Jordan, and I've let you see it with your own eyes. And then Moses, the servant of the Lord, died and was buried by God in a valley in the land of Moab. And sort of the obituary that's published at the end of the book of Deuteronomy There's not arisen a prophet since in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, except, of course, until Jesus Christ came. So we come to the book of Deuteronomy. The book opens with the Lord commanding Joshua to cross the Jordan and take possession of the land. Now we're in Joshua chapter 1, verse 5. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. So be strong and courageous. Remember how many times that was said, not only Joshua, but all the people at the end of Deuteronomy. Now we keep hearing it in Joshua chapter 1. Be strong and courageous. Verse 6, only be strong and courageous. Verse 7, being careful to do all according to the law that I've given. Don't turn from the right. Don't turn from it to the right or to the left. Stay focused on what you read in the law. And so motivated by the book of the law, which, as he says to Joshua, as you go back to Deuteronomy 17, and there were words to the future king. These are similar sorts of words. It shall not depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night. Be careful to do all that is written in it. Then you will have good success. And so we're at a transition point where God is going to lead and to shape and to guide and to mold Joshua into the kind of leader he wants him to be through the book of the law, meditating on it, doing what it said, not allowing it to depart from his mouth. Think about Deuteronomy 6. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And these things shall be a sign on the doorpost, as a sign on your forehead. Write it, bind it, do whatever it takes to see it, keep it before you, and to remember it. Again, have I not commanded you? Listen to how repetitive. Be strong and courageous. Don't be frightened. Don't be dismayed. So God is with them. I want to pause just a minute to speak about this crossing of the Jordan. It's obviously very important for Israel at this point in their history, and it will remain for those who remember what God has done. This event is like, as we will see, it's like exiting Egypt. But it's also become something deeply symbolic for Christians. Entry into the promised land. Of course, we're not going on into the land of Israel. We're going on into that place God is preparing, has prepared for us. When I tread the verge of Jordan, bid my anxious fear subside. We sing that from Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over home. I am a poor wayfaring stranger. On Jordan's stormy banks I stand, cast a wishful eye. So we get to the point in our lives where we're looking for that place. We want to cross into the promised land. I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming to carry me home. And then I don't have space on the slide and chose not to create a new one, but from the hymn, He leadeth me. And when my task on earth is done, and when by thy grace the victory's won, in death's cold wave I will not flee, since God through Jordan leadeth me. Do you see, you hear how what is happening here in Joshua chapter 3 has become deeply symbolic and especially meaningful for us. And one of the other things I want to say in preparation or introduction to this lesson is like before, because Joshua, remember, he's been at the same place before, back Kadesh Barnea on the edge of the promised land, and like before, he's going to send some spies into the land. But notice this time, he doesn't send 10, he sends 2. He's remembering 2 spies who went before. One's name was Caleb, the other's name was himself. It was Joshua. And so he sends a couple of men secretly across the river, spy out the land. And that's where you get the story of Rahab and Rahab's testimony that was given to the spies that was then to be delivered to the people. Rahab's testimony was, I know that the Lord has given you the land. And she speaks about the fear of God is swept throughout that region because they've already heard how God brought Israel out of the land of Egypt and how God has been with them through the time of wilderness wandering. And so the fear of God is swept through the land, and she basically testifies to Yahweh as God who will prevail. And the spies go back with those words ringing in their ears and say to Joshua, truly the Lord has given all the land into our hands. A little different this time compared to the previous time. So we'll start at 3:1. Early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim and went to the Jordan, where they camped before crossing over. After 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp, giving orders to the people. When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God and the priests who are Levites carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. But keep a distance of about 1,000 yards between you and the ark. Do not go near it. And so here's a very key event in Israel's history. Joshua, after getting the report from the spies, immediately moves them close to the Jordan, and the Jordan is at flood stage. How are they going to get across this river that is roaring at flood stage? For it's obviously near the end of the rainy season, which would be, I think, putting it in about mid-spring in the land of Palestine. About mid-spring or a little later would be the end of the rainy season. But it's a key event because as we're going to see, this becomes an important teaching event for Israel present, that is the generation crossing the river at this point, but also Israel future. We're going to get to the point about what do these stones mean. And also I notice it's almost as if there's a worshipful intent. Joshua 3:5, Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. This ought to remind us of Sinai, when the people were told by God to wash their clothes and prepare for meeting with Him there at the foot of Mount Sinai. And so there's almost the sense of it is a time of what is about to happen here is a time of worshiping God. And it truly is worship in the sense, if we understand worship as serving God and honoring God and obeying God. And so Joshua says to the priests, take up the Ark of the Covenant, pass on ahead of the people. They took it up and went on ahead. And part of this matter of consecrating themselves, it's like maintaining, there's an appreciation here for the holiness of God. God is going to be among us. We want to be prepared for that. We want to do what we need to do to honor His presence among us, to give Him respect. And so like Egypt, like the Red Sea, like Sinai, a time and probably the time of preparing through the Passover, going into the Red Sea, come to Sinai. That's what I'm thinking about here. And their respect for the holiness of God. There's something about the distance of divine holiness, and yet we also see how as the flow of the history that's laid out in Scripture develops, God there's not only there's a distance, and yet there's a tremendous closeness as God draws us to Himself. But always there should be some thought given on our part about preparation for the presence of the Lord. Now verse 7, and the Lord said to Joshua, Today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so that you may know that I am with you, as I was with Moses. Tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river. So come to the edge and keep walking and stand in the middle of the river. And then he says, and then God speaks to Joshua. Joshua turns and speaks to all the Israelites. Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. All of this is the attention in this piece of the book of Joshua is, first of all, there's attention on Joshua. Today I will exalt you. And here's what God is going to do that. Give the priests direction. He does. They do it. The people listen to what Joshua has to say. He explains all of what's going to happen. And here's the explanation: that they will know that the living God is among them, that he will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. See, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth will go into Jordan ahead of you. Now then, choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. And as soon as the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap. So set foot in the Jordan. And what happened? It was dry land. Just like Exodus 14:21, when God made the Red Sea dry land and the waters were divided. And all Israel passed by on dry ground in Joshua chapter 3, verse 17, just as had happened back in Exodus 14. The people were listening. Joshua was explaining. The ark of the Lord goes before them, the Lord of all the earth. And one of the things that's going on here is that Joshua wants them to understand he's not just the Lord who delivered them out of Egypt. He's not just the Lord in the wilderness. He is the Lord of all of the earth. He is going with them, and he is Lord of all of the earth. He is not a deity created by man who has a limited sphere. No. He is creator of all things, and his sphere of sovereignty is unlimited. Because all of the peoples that they're going in to defeat all worship idols. And they worship gods that are gods of the mountains, gods of the trees, God of the sun, etc., etc. But Yahweh the Lord, one of the interesting things here is here's a place where you have God's proper name, Yahweh, that was given in Exodus chapter 3 or 4, Exodus, when God spoke to Moses out of the burning bush, and he gave him, this is my name, Yahweh. And then there's the title that follows it. So typically what we're going to read in translation is Lord the Lord, because the Jewish people wouldn't say, out of fear of desecrating the name of God, the true name of God, Yahweh, they wouldn't say it. They would say Lord instead. So, but here you have, truly, you have Yahweh, who is the Lord, which is, the Lord is also a title of God or a name of God that is used exclusively of God in the Old Testament. And this is how you're going to know Yahweh's among them. He is enriching their understanding of the one who is among them, the one who is going before them, the living God, the Lord of all the earth. And so this is an event. What is going on here bears witness to the great reality of the nature, power, and place of God in all the earth. These are things then that ought to provide the encouragement we need to endure, that ought to give us hope for whatever circumstance in which we find ourselves. So when the people camped across the Jordan, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now, the Jordan is at flood stage during the harvest. Yet as soon as the priest who carried the ark, and so one of this whole section of Joshua, bit repetitive as you see. We've been told this is going to happen. Now we're told again, and there's also going to be a summary to follow. As soon as the priest who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing, piled up in a heap a great distance away. So there's quite a bit of the riverbed that is cleared of water so that all Israel, a multitude of people, could cross over at the same time, maintaining a good distance from the Ark of the Covenant. So you see tremendous miracle that happened here. It's at flood stage, not a coincidence. I don't think it's just coincidence that they were at Jordan at flood stage. Among them is the living God, the Lord of all the earth, bearing witness. So the people crossed over the Jordan. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant stood firm. We're told again, stood firm on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed crossing on dry ground. That when they told the story, when the day would come, when the children would see the pillar of stones and ask, well, what does this mean? What is this about? Dry ground, dry ground, dry ground. So here we have in these verses the summary of the details of that which preceded. This whole word about dry ground is prompt the remembrance of an original salvation story. In other words, go back and think about coming out of Egypt. And this is truly right here the central message that is to be remembered in the future. And when the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priest stood, and to carry them over with you, and to put them down at the place where you stay tonight. So 12 stones, 12 tribes. A lot of significance in the word, that is the number 12. So one more thing before the river resumes its the flood waters flowing to the Dead Sea, was to gather some stones, one for each tribe, to be stacked into a monument so that what has happened this day would not be forgotten. It would be a memorial that will serve to remind them to faithfully keep covenant with Yahweh, so that the story is going to be told again and again. I asked the question, I wonder what our memorial is. What do we use to remember our salvation, the work that God has done? So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, and they do it. They do what God has commanded them to do. Joshua gets a little bit of explanation when he says in verse 6, to serve as a sign among you in the future when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Go back, and tell them the story. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. Thank you for the pause there. So he did it. Joshua proves to be a very capable and obedient leader as God commanded, so he does. And he also serves as interpreter of why God is telling them to do this, the intent for the future, and thus becomes the founder of a later teaching practice among the people. That's what happens here, is not unlike what ought to be happening and is happening in church leadership today. Excuse me. So what monuments do we have? That was the question I asked. Remember your baptism and the Lord's Supper. So for each of us as Christians, there is a one-time event and there is a weekly event. in which we can remember our salvation and what God has done to secure our salvation. So the Israelites did as Joshua commanded them. They took 12 stones, and so the story is sort of summarized right here. And one more thing, what happens, let me see, is it in this piece of the text? Also, notice verse 9. Joshua set up 12 stones that had been in the middle of the Jordan at the spot where the priest who carried the Ark of the Covenant had stood. And what, it doesn't say this, there's no explanation, but what I kind of assume is, and when the Jordan was no longer at flood stage, you could at least see the top of those stones. And so there's actually going to be two memorials. One where the priest stood, again, tell the story of the dry ground, or one at their first camp, the memorial that is made, the memorial pillar of stones that's made by the stones carried out by each representative of the tribe, that's going to be erected at the first camp. So that day, kind of a summary statement, that day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel. They revered him all the days of his life, just as they had revered Moses. Then the Lord said to Joshua, command the priests carrying the ark of the to come up out of the Jordan. So we kind of, obviously the record of this story is not quite as linear as we would like for it to be. We piece it all together as to what happened. But so he tell them to come out. They do. No sooner had they set their feet on the dry ground of the land above the river bed, then the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and ran at flood stage as before. And then on the 10th day of the first month, so a date is given here as to when this occurred, and they camped at Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. So now we're across the Jordan, on the west side of the Jordan, and we're looking at we're in the plain of Jericho, and we're looking, I don't know if they could have seen Jericho from there. I don't think you can from that point, but it's really not very far away. And again, circle back to the teaching purpose of all of this. Joshua said to the Israelites, verse 21, in the future when your descendants ask their fathers, what do these stones mean? Tell them. Israel crossed Jordan on dry ground. The Lord did it. He went before you. The Lord did to the Jordan just what he had done to the Red Sea. Remember, this is the work of God, evidence of God's presence among his people in the past, to assure them of his presence in the present whenever they were reading are hearing the story again, or in some cases reading again the story that's recorded there. So the whole purpose of this, again, is multiple ways to remind them of their story, remind them of who they are. Don't forget the Lord your God. He did this so all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful. Everything that's happened there is then to become a witness. And certainly Israel was the direct and most immediate witness, but I'm confident that the report of what had happened is going to spread throughout the land, so that they would know, always fear, that they would know that God is God, that Yahweh is God, and that they would always fear them. So it served to as a teaching tool into the future, always prompting basically their confession. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord alone. That's the heart of the message of Deuteronomy, to be repeated and remembered into the future. So some theological perspective here. again, as I've already said, I'm going to do some summary work now, but the central focus is kind of initially on Joshua and who he is and what he's to do, but there's a central focus on the action of God. These symbols of the presence of God actually begins to shift in some ways. That is, no longer is there a pillar of cloud, no longer is there going to be a pillar of fire. Now it's the Ark of the Covenant. And that really kind of we weren't prepped for that exactly. Who said we needed to be? But kind of the point is, God is going before them, and a symbol of that presence is the ark, but also of what happens, and their memory and their testimony and the continued memory of what happened. The waters divided the dry ground. And so it's another Exodus miracle, so to speak, testifying to the truth that Yahweh was Lord of all the earth. God was with Israel all the way. And that's, if you look at the end of Deuteronomy, or much of Deuteronomy, and then into the first part of Joshua, just notice how often this message is being repeated for the people of Israel, so that they would not forget. Sometimes it's so easy for us to get, and he's working hard that they would not forget, because everything that went on here had great implication for the future. Also in focus is the obedience of Israel. God helped them miraculously, but not automatically. They had to be obedient to God as God spoke through Joshua, giving them directions on what to do. So the priests had to be obedient. The people had to be obedient. They were called upon to sanctify themselves and to go where God said go, and where God led them in the person of his chosen leader. And so there's also, which is just kind of picking up or application of a theme that comes from the Deuteronomy regarding obeying God in all that he had said. And kind of the question then that's hanging in the background is, will obedience continue to be modeled and taught among the people as we go into the promised land and find homes there? Think about it. What if we follow our leaders? And I'm not intending to be manipulative in any way. Just think. The Lord spoke to Joshua. Joshua spoke to the people. The people did what Joshua commanded. Now, I know we can see kind of that sequence a bit differently, but what if we follow leaders? Think about it. Go to Hebrews 13. I'm not going to... There's a word at the end of Hebrews 13 about respecting them and giving them our obedience. I should have added that to the slide. I'm not going to do that now. That would be a New Testament link to what is going on here. Stones in the story. So there are 3 separate descriptions of the memorial stones. 2 memorials of 12 stones. I pointed that out. One at the first camp, one in the middle of the Jordan. And what happens there is very essential. The what of gathering the stones, arranging the monuments is essential, but the why is more important. Why? So we can teach. Why? So we can remember. Why? So that we will not forget our God. So that when your son or your daughter asks, makes me wonder, what's going on among us that would prompt our children to ask a question that gives opportunity to teach the gospel? 2 things I think about again, or at someone's baptism. Maybe a child will say, why are you doing that? Or at some point in the observance of the Lord's Supper, hopefully our children will ask, what does this mean? I wonder, are our children asking questions And I would wonder, are we listening and able to respond to them? When and where are our teaching opportunities for future generations? Well, here we go, some questions for your discussion. What kind of memorial or testimonial evidence should we look to or should we prepare to testify to what God is doing or has done in our lives? I'd probably also frame that question in terms of what kind of memorial or testimonial evidence has God given us? That's actually a better way to ask the question. Has God given us? Israel had the Ark of the Covenant. What symbols of divine presence do we have among us? What can leaders learn about leadership from Joshua? Well, in what is to follow, we'll go to Joshua chapter 5, and Joshua fight the battle of Jericho. Maybe I'll find a cappella rendition of Joshua fight the battle of Jericho. Thank you very much for being present for this class. I really do enjoy reading through these Old Testament texts with you. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace this time and forevermore. God bless.